Fascism of thought is what many people call the Swedish free speech, or rather lack thereof. The public debate in Sweden is quite narrow. Attempting to discuss some issues like immigration can get you imprisoned. Certain other topics won't get you imprisoned, but established media won't allow any discussion of them. Included here are such matters as abortion, which in Sweden is considered a natural right. Introducing the death penalty is also ruled out. While the article in the American Bill of Rights that guarantees Americans free speech is only 3 sentences long, the Swedish Code of Law from 1949 that regulates this matter is a no less than 10,000-word monstrosity. It begins with a paragraph that seemingly grants citizens freedom of speech, yet what follows in this ordinance are not guarantees for free speech, but instead the legal options that are made available to the government for punishing speech offenders. The first paragraph reads as follows. With freedom of the press is understood the right of every Swedish citizen to, without any by public authority or other public body in advance introduced obstacles, publish writings, to afterwards only in front of a legal court be held responsible for their contents, and to not in any other case be punished therefore than if this content violates distinct law introduced to maintain public order, without restraining public information. The sole right to prosecute speech crimes under Swedish law is held by the Chancellor of Justice, which currently is a man named Göran Lambertz, who you may remember from such movies as Lambertz and the Supreme Court at Ice Rink. Or perhaps from Lambertz and the Cucumber. The language in this ordinance is a misleading and often superfluous one, like for example paragraph 1.3. For abuse of the freedom of the press or assistance therein, no one in any other order or in other case than this ordinance may be prosecuted or be held accountable or liable for damages or have the publication confiscated or seized. It's comforting to know that I can't be fined, imprisoned or have my publications seized unless there is some clause in this 10,000-word ordinance that provides for it. The old Soviet constitution from 1936 also had a clause in it seemingly granting citizens free speech, yet we all know how much that meant. Millions of people were executed for their political activism. This Swedish ordinance also grants the Chancellor of Justice the power to confiscate material that violates the speech laws even before the suspected offender has been charged with anything. If there is justification that a publication because of a breach of the press law may be confiscated, the publication may be seized awaiting a decision thereon. Before press law charges are raised or an application at a court has been made for the confiscation of the publication, may, if the crime belongs under a public trial, assignment according to paragraph 1 about seizure and ban on publication be delivered by the Chancellor of Justice. These two paragraphs have seen heavy use in what's more or less been a witch hunt against one man. Ahmed Rami, a Moroccan immigrant who is believed to be behind the conspiracy-themed website Radio Islam. Over the years since arriving in Sweden, his outspokenness on certain topics has made him many enemies and has also made him the target of many lawsuits. In September of 2002, attorney Tora Holst ordered the police to search his home and seize his computers, which they did at 6 in the morning one day, since he was suspected of being behind the website. Attorney Holst also told the press that a certain surveillance had yielded results, most likely referring to the extensive internet monitoring the Swedish government has had in operation since the mid-1990s. However, in June of 2004, the charges were dropped and a trial was never held. The police had not found sufficient evidence that Rami was running the website. This was not the first time the authorities had investigated this website. Another investigation had taken place back in 1998, but the charges were dropped that time as well, when an 18-year-old woman had claimed responsibility for the material on the site. In neither case did a court first conclude that the material was to be considered hate speech. Only the decision of the Chancellor of Justice was required to start an investigation and search Rami's home. Rami's most well-known encounter with the justice system took place in 1989 to 1990, when he was sentenced to 6 months in prison by the Court of Stockholm for a book he had written, along with a number of shows he had held on a local radio station. This affair received quite a lot of attention and may just have been the defining moment for whether the restrictions on the application of the hate laws were to remain, or whether people would be able to be sentenced on looser grounds. Free speech in Sweden was dealt a serious blow the day he received his sentence, and many other dissidents would go to prison with him during the coming 2 decades. On the 5th of December 1997, a man named Don Berner had held a speech at a Swedish university in which he would be found guilty of having committed hate crimes. A female researcher at the university named Carolina Matti had invited him for a lecture on the topic, "What do the Nazis want?" Not only was Berner convicted, but Matti was as well, for assisting in a hate crime. On top of that, she was also fired from her position at the university where she had received her PhD. The portions of the speech for which he was sentenced included such quotes as "Our women are being raped by cultural enrichers of other races" and "Multicultural youth gangs spread fear." After the speech, Berner answered questions from the audience, and the answers he provided were added to the charges. Berner was sentenced to 1 month in prison by a lower court on the 16th of June 1998. The verdict was appealed, and the next court sentenced him to 2 months in prison. Finally, at the Supreme Court, the previous verdict was upheld. Since then, both Matti and Berner have changed names to dodge the mass media witch hunt they became the targets of. The home of Berner's father was also vandalized by left-wing extremists, even though this man was actually a communist. Another man who's done tours of the Swedish courts for speech violations is Björn Björkqvist. He's been charged with hate crimes on numerous occasions. One of those times was after he had held a speech on the 5th of October 2002, where he said this: "I don't think I'm alone in feeling bad when Swedish girls are being raped by immigrant hordes." For this he was acquitted in the first court on the 11th of September 2003. After the verdict was appealed, he was however sentenced to 2 months in prison on the 25th of May 2004. On the 5th of December 2003, while this trial was still in progress, he published an article online on his party's webpage that would lead to another prosecution, one where he attributes Africa's poverty